Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of the Person to Person podcast. Could you introduce yourself and tell us, who you are and what you do?
Well, my name is Kim Gordon, and I'm an author. I write fantasy romance. I have a completed trilogy that is out, and then I have other things that I'm releasing and that are in the works.
And when is your newest book, A Beastologist Field Note of Fated Affection, coming out?
2 weeks from today, actually. So it would be July 23rd, 2 weeks from the day we're recording this.
Yeah. Could we start by talking a little bit about your background? So, where are you from and what inspired you to start writing?
Ooh, this is a good question. Gosh. So I'm from the US. I'm in Oklahoma. I don't know how much you or your listeners know about Oklahoma. And what inspired me to write? Oh gosh, I don't know. I am not one of those people that have always wanted to be a writer, which I think a lot of
Really?
authors will say that. I've always had stories in my brain, and I've always been a very intense daydreamer, like to the point where if I don't have anything to do in that moment, I might like stare at the wall and just completely create like a whole story, which you're like, yeah, yeah,
And
you
very
get that.
much the same.
Mhm. And a few years ago, I was approaching my 40th birthday and I was kind of like, I just want to write some of these. Like, I really want to try. Um, and so I started, and it was really hard, and I didn't know what I was doing. And I read a lot about writing and, watched a lot of YouTube videos, got to know some other writers, and just kind of went from there.
Were you nervous to start writing?
Oh, yeah.
And did you have
Well,
one story?
maybe not to start, but I was nervous for other people to read it.
And why was that, do you think?
Um, Because I was so new at it. I still feel very new at it, but, like, Daughter of the Earth trilogy, they always say don't publish the first thing you wrote, but I that is the first thing I actually, like, completed, so
Wow.
I did it anyway.
So when you started writing it, did you write, so obviously it's a trilogy. Did you write
Mhm.
one, then the other, or did you write all of them at the same time? Like, how does that work? Did you know, what was going to happen?
That's a good question. Kind of a little bit of both, so I did definitely, map out kind of the whole story and what I wanted to happen, and I was pretty sure it was gonna be a series. I wasn't exactly sure how many books, and then as I just got deeper with, like, lore building and the plot, then I realized, "Okay, this is probably going to be a trilogy." And I wrote the first 2 books kind of at the same time, and I have a lot of people that were like, "How did you release those so fast?" It's because I kind of wrote them all, like, together because I was afraid that if I made a change in a later book, then it would affect the earlier book, and so I was
Yeah.
like, "I wanna get it as much done as I could before I, start publishing them."
And I've just thought of this right now, but if they were to make your books into like a series or a movie or anything, do you have like a cast in your head for it for Daughter of the Earth?
I have a few, but I'm really bad with celebrity names. I always forget on the stop. Oh gosh, who's the guy? David Corn Sweat. Do you know who that is?
But
He
I
plays
know faces, I'm terrible with
Yeah,
names.
me too. The newest Superman movie that just came out, like, the guy that plays him, I see him, like, as Kaz,
Yeah.
um, hardcore. Ava was hard for me. Rain, I have no idea, absolutely no idea. Like, I don't think anyone can do him justice.
Do you know who I picture as Rain? And I've thought that I don't know
Yeah,
if you
who?
I don't know if you watch like Thrones or Night of the Seven Kingdoms, but Finn Bennett, who's in Backrooms and in Game of Thrones, I honestly think
Okay,
he
which
would be
I have
such a good.
watched Game of Thrones. What
He's
does he
in Night of
play?
the
Who does he
Seven
play?
Kingdoms, the new one. He plays
Oh, we
Arion,
haven't
but
watched that yet. Okay.
Arion's kind of evil, but he plays comedy people really well and like characters with a lot of depth beneath that. I think he'd be very good. And he looks really
Oh,
nice with
that's
silver
fun.
hair.
Okay, okay. I'll have to pay attention because we probably will watch that at some point, so I'll have
Yeah,
to remember.
it's
Yeah.
really good. So I'm about 60% through book 2 of Daughter of the Earth, and I love it so much. First
Mhm.
thing I read on my Kindle, which is really cool.
Oh, that's
So,
lovely. I love that.
yeah. Could you take us through a little bit what inspired that story specifically? And could you take us from a little bit on the road back of the journey from like when this idea came in your head to when you wrote it and then publishing it? How did that happen?
Yeah, and I remember very vividly because do you play Stardew Valley by chance?
No, but that is actually something a lot of people recently at uni have told me that I should do.
Okay, it's a really fun game, and I was there was a new update that had come out, I don't remember, several years ago,
Yeah,
and so my son and I were actually playing it together, like, obsessively with the new update, and that is what inspired the story because Stardew Valley starts at, like, a farm, like, you own a farm and you run a
yeah,
farm, and it's very, like, cozy, and so I just kind of kept thinking, like, "Oh my gosh, I would love to write a romance book about a flower farmer," but then I thought, "But how do I make it fantasy?" Just because I love fantasy.
yeah.
And so it kinda went from there of like, well, what if she finds a portal and what if, all this stuff happens? And the original plot is so different than what I ended up changing it to too, which is fun. Um, but so I don't know, I just kinda went from there and like brain dumped everything. And that's when I really decided like I'm just gonna try this and I'm gonna write it.
Well, I remember when I was reading book one, and I'm not going to name any character names because this reveal very much shocked me. But there's one
Sure.
character that I was convinced was going to be like the big love interest. I think you know who I mean. And
Mhm,
I remember
mhm.
because I had my exams that week, and I was walking to the library, and I was walking with my boyfriend, and I was listening to the audiobook, and I was like, "What's happened? What's happened?" And I was like, "You're not gonna believe this." And I like info dumped like an hour. Best reveal of any book. I've never been so
I
shocked
love
in all my
that.
life. I was like,
It's really cool to hear when people get shocked because when you write it yourself and then you reread it, you already know what's gonna happen, so it's like, I
yeah,
can't see what maybe a reader would see, so it's cool when you hear people that are like, "Oh, I
yeah.
wasn't expecting that." I'm like, "Okay, okay, that's good."
No, I was honestly Corey, that's my boy. He was laughing because I was just like the gasp that I did. And our uni is like a big walkway, and everyone was like looking at me
Uh-huh.
like, "What is this girl? What is this girl doing?"
That is so funny. I love that.
You were mentioning a little bit earlier about, how actually releasing it into the world and like giving your characters to the world is kind of nerve-wracking. How does it feel to like give these characters that you've written? And I imagine, I don't know, almost a little bit like your children, they're your creations. How do you feel about, giving them to the world, and how do you cope with people's like reception to them?
It's hard. I'm getting better at it, but it's very scary because you're right, they are kind of like your kids and you feel very protective of them, and so I don't really look at reviews anymore.
Yeah,
I think a lot of newer authors do in the beginning, and I did, and I've seen some mean ones, and it's fine. Like I have a very thick skin, but you do get protective. Like if someone criticizes your character,
yeah,
sometimes you're like, no, 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 that's not why they did that. You wish you could explain things, but I just try to remind myself that everyone has their own way they view the world and perceptions, and so you just hope that things come across you the way you wanted to, and hope that people love them as much as you do.
do you have any characters that you feel particularly protective of if you had to pick?
What Rain.
Yeah,
He's my favorite character, but he's also I think he's everyone's favorite
yeah.
character, and no one honestly, he's the one character that no one's criticized.
Wow. See,
Sometimes I hear
Rain is
complaints about,
great.
the others, but they never complain about him, so.
Rain is great, but I'm an Ava girl. I think Ava's fantastic. I love Ava.
I love her, and, it's hard because she has anxiety, and I think
Yeah.
sometimes people interpret it as, like, she's really immature. That one actually does bother me a little bit, because I'm
Yeah.
like, "Well, I don't see her as immature, I see her as, like, she struggles with anxiety," which maybe that comes across as
Yeah.
immature,
No,
but
it
I think
does.
that's interesting. Mhm.
And I think that's very relatable. Like when at the beginning, obviously she inherits the flower farm, like the way
Mhm.
that she's reading up to try and do everything right. I think that's relatable to so many like women and just people in general. This
Mhm.
desire to really do well, and I think that that really comes across. And one of the things that I really fell in love with about the book was animal companions. I just think that is the
Mhm.
coolest thing ever. How did you come up with that idea, and how did you pick the animals that everyone was going to have?
Ooh, that's such a fun question. The idea I'm just a huge animal nerd, like,
Yeah.
I almost went into wildlife biology in college, like, that was gonna be my
Wow.
major and everything. So, I still even though I didn't end up doing that, I actually went into psychology. I still like, I go hiking and go birding, and I'm, like, know a lot of animal facts,
Yeah.
it's a passion of mine. So, pretty much everything I'm writing has some animal in it in some form just because I like animals. Um, but I think the animal companion is I don't I wish I don't see it as much in books. I'm sure they exist, but I haven't read it
I've
as
never
much.
really seen that in a book that much.
Yeah,
Except
and so I
maybe
just
Game of
wanted
Thrones with
that.
their like, but like I've never seen it where they can actually like communicate. I think that's really cool.
Right. I wanted them because I love nature and earth, and so
Yeah,
creating, like, the earth magic, it just made sense in my brain, like, well, what if some of them have animal companions? And as far as deciding what went what, I kind of went on personality, like, what seemed to match each
yeah,
person, and, like, I'd kind of go through different types of animals and then realize, "Oh, yeah, that totally fits for Rain," or "This
yeah.
fits for, Thorn," or whatever. So
How did you like come up with the how did you come up with the names for your characters, for the characters, for the world, for the animal companions? What was the process like for that?
I usually just get on this is gonna sound so strange, but I will Google and get on, like, baby naming websites and things like that, and then I will just look through names until some stick out to me and seem to fit characters' personalities,
I
is really
love
kinda
that.
what I do. Yeah.
Guys, you must have been through like so many like name ones for some of the names. Like Casimir, I think is a really cool, unique name.
Yeah, I
Same
saw
with
that name and I was like, "Ooh, I love that name," and I feel like it fits him, and so
this. I was wondering in your new book, obviously the main characters are Cerise and Liam. Also,
mhm.
Liam Pendragon is the coolest fantasy surname I've ever heard ever. How did you come up with those two? I think they're just such cool names.
I don't really remember how I came up with for first names, for sure, I still do look at, kind of like naming websites, and there is a really cool, fantasy generator. It's not like generative AI, I think it's been around a really long time, but it's like fantasy
I know
name
exactly
generator.
which
Do you know what
website
I'm
you
talking
mean.
about?
I know exactly
Yeah,
which
I
one you
use
mean.
that a lot. I don't always take names from them because sometimes I don't like what they come up with,
Yeah,
but then it's like I'll see one and then I'm like, "Oh, I kind of like it," but I tweak it a little bit, and
yeah.
then so that's what I've done for a lot of, like, the kingdoms names or, last names and things like that too.
Yeah. So in your new book, and I've kind of changed this question a little bit, but do you have
Mhm.
any character in your new book that is special to you or a particular favorite of yours? And if so, why?
That's really hard, but I love them all, but I identify really hard with Cerise, because I used to be very, very type A like her, where, like,
Yeah,
and I still can be to a point. I'm not very good at being spontaneous. If my friend were to call me right now and say, "Hey, go to lunch with me right this second," I would probably be like, "No, no, no, I didn't plan for that today. I can't do
yeah.
that." So I identify with her a lot with those types of things.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think it was very relatable as well, the way that she's structured. And I mean,
Mhm.
so for context for everyone, I've read the book as an ARC reader, and you guys have got a real treat coming. It is amazing. And I think that that's something that a lot of people will identify with. And was that sort of why you wrote Cerise like that, because you identify with those sort of traits and you haven't seen that much in literature?
Think so, and I think too, just I think a lot of women can identify
Yeah.
with that, especially women who are in academia or in any kind of like leadership role or high pressure role where it does tend to be dominated by men. I think that it's a really common experience.
Yeah.
So
And could you give us a very brief introduction to Cerise and Liam, and a little bit of what, inspired them, particularly Liam, because we haven't really touched on him yet?
do you mind repeating the question?
Yeah, don't
Like,
worry. Yeah.
okay,
Do you give us a very brief introduction to the main two characters, so Cerise
okay,
and Liam, particularly Liam, because obviously we haven't spoken about him much and he deserves a lot of airtime. And, what inspired you to write them and what inspired their characters?
okay. Um, well, we'll talk about Liam first since we haven't talked about him yet. Liam is a very quirky, kind of laid back, very intelligent, very funny guy, but he doesn't care about deadlines, doesn't care about organization. He is very, very passionate about his job, loves teaching, but doesn't like all of the administration stuff that goes along with it, like
Yeah,
grading papers and being organized and, all of that stuff. And then Cerise is the opposite, and I kind of wrote them that way because I think it's really fun to do opposites attract and then figure out what they actually have. They actually have a lot in common.
yeah,
And so she's very rigid, very uptight, but she's not mean. She's just struggles with not being in control, and she's very motivated, and I wanna move up, and I wanna become a dean, and, that my career is important to me.
Yeah. And was that always something that you had in mind for this, that they would be almost, I would refer to them as like similar opposites, like they're very opposite in a lot of ways, but the fundamental, you know, values and ideas, they're so similar. Was that
Mhm.
something that you always had in mind?
So, it's interesting because I'm not a huge planner, um, with books. Like, I'll have a general idea of characters, but a lot of the things come out as I'm writing. So, maybe a little bit, yes, but not until I really got deeper within, like, the drafting
Yeah.
process and their personalities came out, and then, I would expand on that.
Well, how did you like craft this world? Because obviously this is a, you know, a different world to Daughter of the Earth. How did you, how did you come up with it? And what inspired, the like academic side of it? Because I think that's really cool and really
Mhm.
unique.
I think that a big part of it was as I was writing the Daughter of the Earth trilogy, which there it and I know you're not finished yet, but it is heavier, a much heavier story than this book, and there are some deaths and there's war and battles and
Yeah.
things. So I kind of needed a break from that. So when I would take breaks from that, started working on this book, and I don't remember how I think I had read maybe a professor-student romance or something, and I was
Yeah.
thinking like, it'd be really cool to have like a professor and professor romance.
Yeah.
And that's where it came up with. And I love nature. So again, it was like, what if they get lost in the jungle? What if it's, you know, some, what if they are basically a fantasy version of wildlife biologists? So
Yeah.
yeah.
What inspired you, with one of the scenes, they get separated from the group. Don't want to say too much about it. How
Mhm.
did you come to that? How did you always know that they were going to get separated, or was that something that came to you while writing?
I always knew they were going to get separated. But I didn't know really when and how. And so there was a lot of me thinking about what kind of perils exist when you're hiking or when you're
Yeah.
in the jungle. And so, kind of going through different dangers that it made sense to me that would be a
Yeah.
good way to separate them from the group.
Yeah. Without giving too much away, do you have favorite scene in Beastologists?
That's so hard, but I think the leech scene is probably my favorite scene.
Was there a
'Cause
scene
it's
that took
so
the
funny.
longest to write?
Oh, mm. Endings are really hard for me.
Really?
Yeah, like towards the last couple chapters of every book, I write and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite because it just never feels right. So those, I would say probably the ending and the epilogue was the hardest, which feels strange because it's not a really difficult part of the book, but figuring out how to tie everything up and end it
Yeah.
is tricky
And
for
did
me.
you, when you finish a book like this, obviously I would imagine, I mean, for Daughter of the Earth, because I mean, it's 3 books, so you were with these characters a long time, but for this as well, is it quite sad in a way to finish them and sort of let them go in the world? How do you deal with that?
It wasn't as sad with this one, kind of like what you said. It's because
Yeah.
they're really only one book. And as I am drafting the next book in that world,
Yeah.
even though they're not the main characters, you still see them a little bit. So I don't
Yeah.
feel like I haven't completely given them up yet. But honestly, with The Daughter of the Earth, I cried when I
Oh,
released that book because it's like sad because you've been working on it for years. And
yeah.
so it is kind of like, oh man, I'm gonna miss these characters.
Does it feel like a lot of pressure, when you've written books before? I mean, it's a different sort of pressure when you're doing your first one, but when you've published things before, do you feel sort of like you need to live up to what people want? Like, how do you deal with that?
Sometimes I think it depends. I do think in series, I did notice, like, especially with the 3rd book,
Yeah,
what if the plot doesn't go the way people were expecting? And are they not gonna like the twists? Are they not gonna like how these things happen? Because those readers who have liked it are already also attached to,
yeah,
characters and to things like that. So that's tricky. Um, yeah, sometimes I do. And I'm already feeling a little bit of pressure because so far people are really liking the Beastologist book. I'm
yeah.
like, what if they hate the next one?
I can't wait for the next. Obviously, I'm not going to say anything, but there's like a little bit after the epilogue. I cannot wait for the next one. I think it's going to be very good.
Or you
Yeah,
can guess who what's going to happen when those people are reconnected. I'm sure you can
Yeah.
guess the role that she's playing. It's gonna be fun.
One of the things that really, struck me in Beastologist is, Cerise has a very difficult relationship with her mother, which again, I
Mhm.
think a lot of people, will relate to that for various reasons. What inspired you to write about this like toxic parental relationship, and what inspired you to build that within the world?
That's a really interesting question. I think that there's 2 maybe reasons. Part of it was accidental, because I may or may not have personal experience with that.
Yeah.
So, I think sometimes that comes out in our writing. And then I work in the mental health field and work in
Wow.
psychology, and so I have had a lot of experience with people who have had toxic parents and
Yeah.
helping them learn how to set boundaries and all that, and it's something I really like. I find it fascinating, so it just kind of
Yeah.
happened.
And do you think your work within that field has sort of inspired how you come up with personalities? And, because one of the things I noticed in all of your books, but particularly in Beastologist, is nobody's one layered. Like it's almost like everybody
Mhm.
has so many different layers to them. Is that something you think has been inspired by your work outside of this?
I think so, I think so, and I think I've also learned that just because you're in your 30s or 40s or 50s or whatever, it doesn't mean you have everything together,
Yeah.
that plenty of people still struggle with career changes or anxiety or whatever, like so.
And then, so as most of the listeners for this will know, so I'm autistic, so neurodiverse, and it was so refreshing and so cool to read a book with like neurodivergent coded main characters. So one of the things that I really wanted to ask you about is what
Mhm.
inspired you to write them in that way, and what sort of research did you have to do before, writing them?
I love this question because I don't know how to let's see, okay, how do I wanna start? Um, First of all, I didn't know that they were going to be when I first started
Yeah,
writing it. I think a lot of times as I'm writing, things just happen, and then when I remember rereading over it, and I don't remember which part it was, something Cerise did, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, she's probably on the spectrum," and,
yeah,
like and then, things with Liam, I actually did not really do research because I do
yeah,
a lot of work with that population in my real job anyway,
yeah,
and so I have a lot of experience with it, and I think you'll understand this too. No 2 people with autism or no 2
yeah,
people with ADHD are like, everyone presents so differently, and
yeah,
so I didn't want, like, a checklist of, well, they need this behavior, they
yeah,
need this behavior. It was just, this is how their personalities came out, and if they were in our world, yes, they probably potentially could be diagnosed with
yeah.
these things. Yeah.
And I think that's why it was probably, I mean, from my perspective, it felt very real. You often
Mhm.
find, in not just in books, but generally in media, when people tend to do neurodivergent characters, they really like do them, if that makes sense. And they
Like,
kind
they're
of,
in a box and
yeah,
they act a
it's like
very specific way.
it's
Yeah.
almost like their character, like neurodiverse, then character, not who's also. And I thought that that was,
Mhm.
really interesting. And it also, so obviously Cerise is quite type A and she's quite prepared. She knows what she's got going on. Liam is
Mhm.
a lot more like flies by the seat of his pants. He does what he wants. He
Mhm.
has his own
Mhm.
things, and they're like in some ways kind of opposite
Mhm.
interpretations of similar things. Is that something that you wanted to do, to have them as that opposite, not in just one box?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you were saying earlier, I like writing layered characters that
Yeah,
have so many different personalities or quirks or challenges, and but then, realize them like, oh, they have similar challenges with their families, and they both are passionate about the same things. But a lot of the things that they struggle with are different too.
yeah.
So, mhm.
How long did it take you to write this book? Because it's so, I mean, it's so, you guys, when I'll put a link, by the way, in the episode description that you should all go so you can get it. But how long does it take you from like concept to when you finish writing it?
I have learned that for me in general, it takes about a year or
Wow.
more. So I don't remember when I first started this book. But what I usually tend to do, it will take me, I write first drafts pretty quickly, like maybe
Yeah.
3 or 4 months, but they're really,
Wow.
really bad.
Well, that's so cool, though.
They're very messy because my first draft is almost like my outline. It's just
Yeah.
sometimes it's messy, sometimes I'm like, "I don't know what to put here," and then I just keep going, and so and then I take 8 months, 9 months longer, and I edit, and I change, and I do all that stuff. So I would say I think I started working on this book at least a year ago, maybe a little bit longer.
Wow. And was that so obviously that I mean a year, it's weird because a year feels like such a long time, but really it's kind of not such a long
It's
time at all.
not,
And
no.
I feel like I mean, I turned 21 in 2 weeks. I turned 21 2 days after the book comes out, actually, which is
Oh, that's exciting.
yeah. So and I think that, you know, it's a really good message because the characters are older, but the themes that they go through are so relevant to people at so many different, whether you're going from
Mhm.
what
I
we'd
think
call
so
like
too.
sixth form to university or university to a job, you know.
Mhm.
And was that something that you were aware of when you were writing and that you were aiming for to make it almost relatable to a lot of people?
Um, I yes and no. I don't necessarily think about trying to make it relatable age-wise. I
Yeah,
do try to 'cause I'm actually about to turn my birthday's in July too, so I'm about to turn 41, and just as I've gotten older, it's harder for me to identify with, like, maybe 19, 20-year-old
yeah,
protagonists. So I try to write characters that I feel like I identify with more, but I do definitely think in general about how people, regardless of age, can identify with certain
yeah.
challenges and things like that.
So when you obviously you change things as you are writing it, but when
Mhm.
you start a book, so with this or with any of your books, do you know how it's going to end, or have you ever done like a major change where you're like, oh, actually, I'm going to just drop this bombshell in that I hadn't planned at all?
I usually know how it's gonna end, but sometimes I don't always know how it's gonna get there. So
Yeah,
and I did actually I'm not gonna say anything 'cause I don't wanna give it away, but I did change how I wanted things to go in the 3rd book of the trilogy, where I just had, like, this idea, and I'm like, "No, no, no, I'm gonna do it this way." But that prompted me having to go back and tweak some things in the 2nd book too, but luckily I thought of that before I had released the 2nd book.
yeah.
But mhm,
And one of the, this is very much for the trilogy. I suppose, like the villains in the trilogy, I find very, very fascinating.
mhm,
Specifically Andres, which when people read the books, they will understand why I'm saying this.
mhm.
Um, we get especially, in the first half of the first book, we get him outside of that role. Was that something that you'd always was that always how that character was gonna end up?
No. Yes
Really?
and no. That's actually one of the changes I kind of made it in for the 3rd book. So I don't wanna give anything away, but, you'll learn more about him, and, like, kind of more about the antagonist in the 3rd book, and those are some changes that it's hard to write villains sometimes.
Really?
Yeah. Mhm.
Do you sympathize at all with, Dedemir and Andras in this? How do you get inside, especially for, like, the last half of the first book? There's some
Mhm.
really visceral and there's really interesting scenes with Ava and with the villains almost. How
Mhm.
do you write that, but also maintain an element of, "Oh, this is why, they're doing that," which you see a lot in the epilogue?
It's hard, I don't really feel any empathy for them much, but I do at least try to ask myself why they're doing the things they're doing. Like, where are they coming from? What is their
Yes.
goal? You know, is the goal just to be evil and world domination, or is like there something more personal, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that helps to write villains too.
Would you ever write a book, do you think, of a villain, just a villain from the villains? Like, because your books are just so I feel like you write the villains really well. Like, I would love to see
I
a
think it would be
villain
fun.
that
I don't have necessarily like an idea for that at the moment, but sure. I mean, if something came to me, absolutely.
and one of the things that I loved, in both of them, and in the trilogy and in Beastologist, so we've
Hmm.
spoken a little bit about the animals, but also just
Hmm.
the world in general, both worlds. The worlds feel, I mean, they're fantasy, but they also feel there's something that you can relate to in them, if that makes sense, you know?
Hmm.
How did you craft these worlds, and how did you even how did you know what you wanted it to be like? How did you take inspiration for what it would look like, that sort of thing?
Very different depending on the books. With the trilogy, I was thinking about, okay, how do we want this world to look? Maybe we can have different kingdoms and each kingdom specializes in certain
Yeah,
types of magic. And then I was trying to think of like things I hadn't read before. So I was like, I haven't really read anything about volcanoes and like using magic related to that, So I kind of um tried to get creative with that. And
yeah,
I'm also a very visual person. Like when I read, I it's a movie in my brain.
yeah.
And so I write that way too. Like I can see where they're walking through the forest and can describe it and things like that.
So one of the things, so I'll put the link in the description. But the first two books of Door of the Earth are, I think, on
Mhm.
Audible. I think the third one will be at some point as well.
It will be there. Actually, I just talked to the audiobook narrator yesterday and she messaged me
Oh,
and said they're getting ready to record it. So I don't have a date, but I think they're aiming for fall, sometime this fall, but I don't know an exact date. So I will
and
let
the
everyone know.
audiobooks, the first one I read on audiobook, second one on Kindle. Um,
The
and
narrators are really good.
so good. Was
Yeah.
that something like how did you feel about, giving it almost to the narrators and having them bring these characters to life? Was that quite nerve-wracking?
It really is because you kind of worry that they're not like, what if they don't do him justice, or what if they
Yeah,
don't have the it's not even like accents and things, but just the personalities and kind of what I was envisioning and how I, envision this
yeah,
person speaking and things like that. But I'm really happy with how it turned out. And I also, um, Beastologist is also getting an audiobook. So I know who the narrators are. I have heard a clip of the guy doing Liam, and he sounds exactly like he sounds in my brain. So it's gonna be good.
yeah, and it's one of those books as well. I feel like when you reread it, you can get something different, if that makes sense. I think
Mhm.
that's a sign of a good book as well, when you can reread it and be like, oh, I didn't notice this the first time.
Right.
I tend to be quite a slow reader, and I finished this in I think 3 days, which is very unlike me
I
because I
love
just
that.
loved
I
it.
love
It
that.
was like so cool, and it has a lot of really strong messages within the book. One of them is like
Mhm.
chasing your joy and things like that. Is there one message in particular that you want readers to take away from Beastologist?
I think with Beastologists, the biggest thing was, like, accepting who you are,
Yeah,
and kind of realizing that life is too short to kind of live the way that everyone else in your life is expecting you to live
yeah,
instead of, find what makes you happy and I think both characters kinda had to do that with their families and their
yeah.
careers and things like that.
Was that something, when you were writing their relationships with their families, is that something that you were quite conscious about of how to take these characters on a journey of finding their joy and finding what they want whilst also navigating, that issue with their families and issues with careers and that sort of thing?
Yeah, and I do think a lot about that as I'm writing, behaviors and how they react to things.
Yeah,
A lot of times when I might think like Cerise reacted this way because of this is something that was drilled into her since she was a child from her mom or, whatever. So yes, I do usually think about stuff like that as I'm crafting the characters.
and do you write almost psychological or like family profiles before you start writing them? Is that something that you do before you start writing the characters, or is it something that more as you write and you think, oh, this is because of this, is because of this, rather than like a distinct?
Kind of a little bit of both. So I will do definitely before I start writing like a rough profile of the character, but a lot of times I don't really get to know them until I'm writing, and usually it's after I've written the first draft, I'll go back and sometimes change things because I this sounds so silly, but a lot of authors say it, and it's very true. The characters a lot of times decide, and you don't like, it just happens, and they kind of go off course, and then you realize,
Yeah.
"Oh, that makes more sense," and so change things.
And do you, so obviously you have like a picture in your head when you're writing, and I think that that really comes
Mhm.
across. In terms of, like how the characters look, and well, how do you think that that comes to you? Or is it just something that it just is?
It kinda just comes to me as I'm writing, whether it's, like, hair color or even race or sexual orientation or
Yeah,
anything. I don't necessarily sit there and think, "Okay, I need to have this kind of character, this kind of character." It's
yeah,
just as I'm creating that character and kind of writing them, then I sometimes just get a visual of how they look in my brain,
yeah.
and then I'll go with that too.
But I think that that's really cool as well because in in both novels, particularly in the trilogy, there's some really cool LGBTQIA
Mhm,
plus characters.
mhm,
How did you always know that that was going to be in the books, and how did you? But you don't see, at least from fantasy that I've read, it's very rare to find a fantasy where relationships are so fleshed out that aren't like the
mhm,
main two. Especially what comes to my head straight away is Jorah. Um,
mhm.
was that something that you were conscious of doing and making it representative, or did it was just natural and it just came to you?
I guess a little bit of both. Like, I definitely wanted to make the world queer normative where basically they're queer characters and nobody bats an eye. It's not a
Yeah,
weird, it's just a thing. And but as far as like who and who played what role, that just kind of came to me as I
yeah,
was writing, like with the queens and the Stone Kingdom and things like
yeah,
that. It was just like, oh yeah, okay, Rain. Oh yeah, Rain is pansexual or whatever. Like
yeah.
as I'm kind of going through. So. Mhm.
Who was the most difficult character in any of the books to write, do you think?
Oh, that's such a good question. I have to think on that because I don't know. Hmm. I would say probably honestly, Ava was kind of tricky for me to write,
Really?
I think. She would because I really like her, and I think sometimes I was afraid of her coming across as annoying. Um, and maybe it's because maybe this is, like, just the misogyny in our world, but I don't know if you've noticed this pattern where a lot of times the female protagonists are
Oh, yeah.
so criticized so much more harshly than the men in books, and so I was very nervous about that. Like, people are gonna think she's annoying, people are gonna think she's whiny, but how do I, portray her anxiety and portray what she's going through without that? And then you also just have to accept that people are critical of women no matter what,
Yeah. And
unfortunately.
and
Yeah.
is that something obviously, like, as an author, as a female author, I do find I don't know if you agree with this, but even in terms of book reviews, I think there's a very different tone in how male books written by men are kind of reviewed than women. I don't know if you found that. It's just very observational. I
Yeah, I haven't necessarily experienced it in, like, my own reviews, but I see patterns for
mm,
sure, especially when it comes to romance or sex in books. I
yeah,
think when women write it, it's like, "Oh, it's pornography, oh, it's smut," and
yeah.
when it's but then Game of Thrones, like, there's so much in
Yeah,
those books, but people don't so I do think that women definitely are more criticized, and the romance genre for sure is
yeah. And
heavily
is that
criticized.
something you were almost I don't know if nervous is the right word, but obviously conscious because obviously all your characters, they're adults, lots of them are in relationships and sexual
Mhm.
relationships. Is that something that you were conscious about when writing and when publishing? And is that something that you had almost prepared yourself, like if you had that criticism or whatever, is that something that you were prepared for or something that kind of surprised you?
Mean, I think I've kind of been aware of it as a reader a lot of the
Yeah,
times too. So I wasn't necessarily nervous about it coming across. Kind of like I said earlier, I tend to have a thick skin, and especially, it's gonna sound silly, especially if it's a man criticizing it, I probably would just roll my eyes and
yeah.
keep going.
Is that something, do you ever because I don't know if I mean, I don't write books, I write on Substack and TikTok. And I
Mhm.
sometimes, I mean, everyone gets these crazy comments. Sometimes you're like, "Whoa, is that something?" How do you and do you have any advice for other like young people, authors, people in general? How do you deal with that? Do you just not look, or if you do see it, how do you cope with it?
I think that I'm thinking. It depends on if it's a rude comment on, like, a post or a video
Yeah,
versus maybe a review that someone has left on, like, Goodreads or something.
yeah,
I do as far as reviews go, I try to remind my if I do come across a mean one, I try to remind myself that, like, I don't know this person, I don't know what's going on in their life. Also, they're allowed to hate it. Like,
Yeah,
I've read books I didn't like, we all have, so it's not, and if it's especially cruel, then I have a couple other friends that I might vent to or things like that.
yeah,
You keep it kind of in. I think that the advice I would give is like find a good supportive group of people
yeah,
and then keep your complaints or vents within that group. Like,
yeah.
don't go post on social media and start complaining about, oh, I got this 1 star review and they were so mean. Like,
I've learned this
that's not
recently.
professional. And like, but go text your friend and be like, oh my
Yeah,
gosh, I can't believe this person said that. Because it is, you do need support and you need to have an
yeah,
outlet. And if I get a comment, which it's been pretty rare, I'm not big enough yet to be getting tons and tons of mean comments. But if I get a mean comment on a post or something, in my opinion, I'm like, well, you commented publicly, so it's fair game for me to respond. And I'm
yeah,
never mean, but I will be firm and
yeah,
answer. And then usually they don't respond back.
yeah. Yeah.
But
Well,
I'll call
I
people out.
just started. I mean, I'm the smallest of the small at the moment. I've got a grand total of 4 subscribers on YouTube right now,
But
which
that's
I
okay.
love.
Yeah.
And but on TikTok, it's quite. I think it's quite crazy how quickly once you hit like I'm on
Mhm,
what like 100 or something followers, and as
mhm,
almost as soon as you hit that, then you start getting them, and it's just it's really interesting, and I think it must be in some ways worse as an author because
mhm.
you're not just defending yourself, you're defending these worlds and these characters, that you've
Right.
created. And I think that that's, and I was wondering, since you've started writing and publishing your writing, have
Mhm.
you like learned any lessons as a writer and as a person from that experience?
I think the biggest lesson is just not to take things personally, that, people are brave behind a screen and also, block people. If someone is just outright cruel or hateful, like, there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with blocking anyone and protecting your peace, and things like that. So, I think that's the biggest lesson, especially with reviews. I've definitely learned not to take it personally. And I think the thing that a lot of authors will learn, and this is advice to anyone who is writing, is you will have opposite reactions about
Yeah.
everything and you can't please everyone. I have literally had people tell me that Ava is their favorite character their favorite FMC they've ever read. And then on the flip side, literally seen reviews where people hated her. You can't, like, there's always going to be people
Yeah.
that, and then that's just the way it is. So write what you love to write and you'll find your readers.
And do your like people in real life, like your family and things, do you let them read your books and things like that?
My husband is a big audiobook person. He's struggles a little bit with dyslexia, so he doesn't do physical books, but he has listened, like, everything that's coming has been on audio. He has listened to them and he will, continue. Um, I'm trying to think of I have a couple family members, like my mom and
Yeah.
my brother, that are also big readers, and so they will listen to my mom might clutch her pearls a little bit at some of it. I don't know if she
It's
wants to
about
read the
that.
musologist book, but,
Were you
she and I are
nervous
very
about
close, and
showing
she's
showing
cool,
your
so she
family?
Huh?
Were you nervous with like, saying to your family, I'm gonna publish a book? Was that something that was quite nerve-wracking for you?
This is kind of funny because a lot of people in my family don't even know. Um,
Really?
so, like, my husband knows and my in-laws know, although my in-laws are very, very, proper, I guess. Like,
Yeah.
they would never I would not even want them to read the books. Like, I don't want them to read the book, but my mother-in-law is very sweet. She's like, "I'm so excited for you. I love you. This is not my cup of tea, so I'm not gonna read it." And she's very honest about it. I'm like, "Great." But she is, like, cheering me on and supportive, and so that's lovely.
Oh,
But, like, as far as extended family, my mom and my brother know, and that's about it. I
yeah.
have a cousin who is she has an English degree, so she actually beta reads for me, and she's a huge reader, so, like, she's been helpful, but pretty much everyone else, I told my mom, I'm like, "Don't tell anyone."
And see, I don't know if I've even told you, so how I came across you, and this is, I mean,
Mhm,
I'm UK, and
mhm,
one of my really good friends from uni, who's a couple of years older than me, doing a master's, shout out to you, Ruby, you are amazing. She had read number one of the trilogy, and she was
uh-huh,
following your Instagram, and I'd commented something because I saw some sort of fan art or something. I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. Ruby DM'd me,
uh-huh,
and she was like, You need to read this trilogy right
That's so
now.
cool.
Yeah.
I love that. I love
So,
that.
I
The
mean,
word of
reaching
mouth.
across the pond, which is really nice.
That's so lovely. I love that so much.
And then, do you have any little hints for what you'll be working on next for everyone?
I do actually. So the professor's world, it is, going to be interconnected standalones, and I have it planned for 3 books, but they're gonna be pretty spaced out, so it'll be, like, 1 book per summer because 'cause they're, cozy and cute. So the next one won't come out till next summer, but I do have things planned in between. The current thing I wanna do a big reveal this fall when I finally start marketing it, but it's dark.
Nice.
Not dark romance. I am not a huge dark romance reader, but it's dark fantasy. Like, the world
Oh,
is
yeah.
very dark. There's a corrupt religious government that is, like, doing public executions. It's very
Oh,
gory,
I
like,
can't wait for this.
horror vibes. It's so fun. I'm gonna have a whole list of trigger warnings with this book, but it is I will give a little hint. It is about a mother who her son is missing, and she hires this mercenary to help her track him down. So,
My gosh, I'm excited. Yeah.
it's I'm having so much fun with it. It is going to be sometime, like, early 2027, and once Ceresa and Liam are out in the world for a little while, then I'll start kinda marketing this book,
Oh, no,
but
I'm excited for that. That's
it's
gonna be
very
getting me
fun.
through that's gonna be getting me through the beginning of my master's next year, knowing that that's coming out.
It's really good, and it's funny because I like to sometimes imagine, like, how my different characters in different books might respond to each other, and the MMC, the main male character in this book, and Casimir would hate each other, which I
Really?
love. Yeah, because he's
There's
very
a
violent, very
TikTok in that.
unhinged, like, very impulsive, and I could see Casimir just hating him, and I think it would be very fun.
And final question, could you just remind everybody when Beastologist is going to be released and where people can get a copy? And also, links are going to be in the description, everyone. So check them out. Socials and everything are going to be in there as well.
Yes, it is releasing on July 23rd, which is a Thursday, and you will be able to get it. It'll be on Amazon and all countries that have Amazon. Most kind of bigger retailers online, so like Waterstones, Barnes and Noble, bookshop.org, those places. I will also have signed copies on my website, although I don't ship overseas just because it's so expensive. So I only ship within the US,
Crazy, isn't it, at the
unfortunately.
moment?
Yeah, it's so expensive. Maybe someday if anything changes and it gets better,
Yeah.
but right now I only ship to the US. And it'll be on Kindle Unlimited as well. And then eventually on audio, hopefully I think they're gonna start recording sometime in August. So maybe by the end of the year. I'm not sure exactly when it'll be finished. So sometime we'll be on audio.
Thank you so much.
You're very,
And
very
thank you
welcome.
so much.